What is up, everyone? Mike Andrews here, back for another great week of college football DFS as I close my pantry door behind me. We have an 8-game slate. It is the conference championship weekend, so all of these games mean a lot to these teams. Some even more than others with CFP playoff implications in the mix, and we'll kind of talk about that as we go. Starting off, I'm gonna go position by position again, even though it's a shorter slate. My article goes game by game, so you can kind of get an idea of what I like in each particular game. But, when you're building lineups, I think you're looking at it position by position, right? That's how DraftKings has it broken down. So let's start here at quarterback. At the top, we have Kenny Pickett of Pitt. Pitt has a massive team total on this slate, 37.75. I actually think they go above that, given how bad Wake's defense has been, and Pitt's offense being very good. Pitt has scored more points than this against better defenses. So, yeah, I like Pitt to put up a big number in this game. This total is 72.5, but there's a very solid chance it goes over that. So I like Pickett. My big problem with Pickett is, obviously, he's priced way up. When you compare him to the next option here, Sam Hartman, in the same game, Pickett doesn't have the same sort of rushing upside that Hartman does, and that is a problem. I think Pickett's production can largely flow into Jordan Addison, his lead receiver, who's also very expensive. The problem with Pickett, like I said, is that he basically has no rushing upside, which means he would need to have one of these 400-yard, 4 to 5 touchdown games. And he certainly can. My issue is that I don't think that's an option, right? That's certainly in play. But he doesn't have that 50-point upside that Hartman does. So if I like this game, which I do, I don't know how much Pickett I get to, just because of his absurdly high price. He's great, but a lot of his production can be soaked up by just playing Jordan Addison. In the UVA game, Pickett scored 29.2 DraftKings points, but so much of his production went to his lead receiver, Addison, at 9,300. Pickett had 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. Addison had 200 yards, 14 catches, and 4 touchdowns, and doubled Pickett's fantasy score. So, when you're up here, if you think all of that production can flow through Addison, which is very likely in a game where, Pitt, I don't know how much they want to use these secondary receivers when Addison can just tear people apart. So I like Addison a bit more than Pickett, particularly in this game environment. I like Hartman a bit more than Pickett as well. Hartman has, I think I put in the article, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 rushing touchdowns in his last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He has 9 rushing touchdowns in his last 8 games. The only game that he really busted was against Clemson's really good defense. I will give him a pass on that one. I like Hartman more than Pickett this week. Hartman also on an underdog team that should be throwing more. Pitt's defense is a major pass funnel. And sure, that could partially be because teams are often behind against Pitt. They have to throw. They're not running the ball as much. But even when they do run the ball, Pitt's run defense has been really good, and that's held true for a few years now under Pat Narduzzi. So I do really like Hartman more than Pickett. Desmond Ridder is interesting for Cincy against Houston. He tore Houston apart last time they played, but Ritter's kind of been disappointing relative to these guys above him and even guys below him. So I don't think I get to Ridder this week. I don't really love much on the Cincy side. Houston's defense, I think, is the best Cincinnati will have faced all year. That I don't love. Cincy, despite going undefeated, has had a pretty garbage schedule, if we're being honest. ECU, SMU, USF, Tulsa, Tulane, Navy, UCF minus Dylan Gabriel, Temple. Notre Dame, yeah, that's a good win, but Hartman isn't breaking the slate in any of these games. I don't think I get to, or Ritter, excuse me, isn't breaking the slate really in any of these games except for like SMU and USF, which have bad defenses. So I just don't think I get there on Ritter. Bryce Young against Georgia. I mean, they really struggled against Auburn, and yeah, that's partially due to Jameson Williams getting the most brain dead targeting penalty I've ever seen. I don't know why he's on punt coverage, but I'll save that conversation. I'm not Nick Saban. But yeah, Bryce Young really struggled against Auburn, put up 24 fantasy points, but that took a bunch of overtimes. And yeah, I mean, I just don't love that spot either. He has no rushing upside. I really like Sam Hartman. Also, just not playing people against Georgia. Pretty good idea. Dustin Crumb from Kent State is probably the top quarterback option on this slate, all things considered. He is kind of like Sam Hartman light, but this game environment is an absolute shootout waiting to happen. Kent State ranks 10th in pace. Both of these defenses are bottom 20 in the country, even in points allowed per game, even worse in terms of FEI, which basically indicates to me that their strength of schedule isn't good, but they're still giving up a ton of points. So I love Crumb in this spot. He probably doesn't throw over 35 times, but he will run around 10 plus times. And yeah, he has similar rushing chops to Hartman. He has a pretty good passing attack with his receivers. He likes to throw the deep ball. That's kind of how they run. They either run or throw deep balls. NIU's defense, not good, as we have talked about. Both of these teams will put up points and give up points. So I like Crumb. It's really tempting to play him because of that 43-point game against NIU last time out. Like, people are going to look at that 52-47 scoreline and stack this game up. And it's overall cheaper to play this game than it is to play the Pitt-Wake game. Those are really, this slate on the whole, I should have led with this, but there are only 2 games with totals over 53.5, which is, these other 6 games are basically like NFL games where you're really like trying to narrow down your options. Like, you're not really stacking these teams with, team totals under 30. So, the only options that we have really for great game environments are the Pitt-Wake game and the Kent State-NIU game, and ownership probably follows that. So, there's ways you can get interesting and different in these 2 games, and then there's also options in these other games that we can talk about. But, I have no interest in players from Baylor, Utah State, Georgia, Bama, Houston, Iowa, even really like Michigan I don't love. Cincy, I don't love, despite their total. Louisiana Lafayette, App State, I don't love that game as a whole either. Like, I have a really narrow player pool in this slate, and I hope these 2 games just shoot out and blow these other games out of the water. That's kind of what I'm hoping for. So, to bring it back to Dustin Crumb, I do like him, but I think he's very reliant on a big passing game and 2 touchdowns just because of how he doesn't tend to throw. He very rarely throws like 3 or 4 touchdowns, whereas Hartman definitely has that in his wheelhouse. He's thrown for 3 touchdowns or more in 4 of the last 5, even more than that going down, but I'm not counting them for time's sake. But Crumb in play, but I think he might be over-owned, and Hartman might be leveraged if you can get up to Hartman. It's going to be tough on this slate. There aren't too many values that stick out like a sore thumb to me. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at there. Logan Bonner from Utah State. This is a bad matchup. Utah State, their team total is 10 points lower than their season average. They do play at a fast pace, but Sdsu will slow the game down to a halt. Bonner really relies on throwing a lot of touchdown passes to get to his value. He will not run. He probably doesn't throw for a ton of yards in this spot. The games they played against solid defenses, like Wyoming, solid defense. They haven't really played too many other games against solid defenses, but Boise, BYU, these other teams that are, I would say, good teams. Yeah, he's struggled. This offense has struggled as a whole, so I do not have any interest in Bonner at this price. Rocky Lombardi from NIU is a really interesting option. He's probably going to play. I think he was held out of the Western Michigan game just for precautionary reasons. They clinched their division. Why risk your starting quarterback in the final game of the season when you're playing the conference championship game the next week? Give your freshman Ethan Hampton some experience. Lombardi is not a good quarterback. Like, this guy is not good. But the Kent State defense is so bad, and they play at such a fast pace that Rocky Lombardi will have opportunities in this game. He's thrown for 30 or more attempts in only 3 games this year. And in those, only one game over 40 attempts, and that was against Kent State when he threw 57 times. So game flow has been really key for Lombardi. Similar in the CMU game, they were down early. Kent State game, they were down early. So Lombardi is really game flow dependent, but if we think that Kent State gets out to a lead here, you got to love Lombardi to throw more, catch up. He threw for 500 yards in their previous meeting, which is absurd. Kent State is kind of the defense through which all players can succeed, right? And they play at such a fast pace that, NIU isn't really any sort of offensive juggernaut, but their offense can succeed in this matchup, as we've seen. So Lombardi is in play, but I consider that more of a game stack situation where you're banking on Kent State to score a lot of points, and then you're bringing it back with NIU scoring a lot of points. So that's kind of the only real situation I play Lombardi if I'm just game stacking this game. Bennett for Georgia, not in play for me. Just not enough volume there. Not enough upside there against a really good Bama defense. Spencer Sanders from Oklahoma State. He's been pretty good lately. But these Big 12 defenses don't really stack up to Baylor's defense. He really struggled in this matchup earlier in the year. I'm just not getting the Sanders at all in this game. Clayton Tune against Cincy's defense, that is a pass for me. Levi Lewis from Louisiana Lafayette used to be more of a running threat, not so much this year. Just not going to be in play for me either. No upside for which you want to pay for him. Yeah, and then we're Chase Bryce from Appalachian State against Louisiana Lafayette. He threw 2 picks, 0 touchdowns, 135 passing yards in this game last time. Scored 9.7 DraftKings points despite having a rushing touchdown. That does not inspire confidence. I don't like him in the same basic game environment that he failed miserably in last time at Louisiana Lafayette. Don't have any interest in Bryce. I want to say he can get there through the air, but he's really only done it in, like I said, games against bad defenses. And then Coastal Carolina game, they were at home that game. App State, definitely a big home field advantage. They have a strong home support. So I don't love this spot for Bryce. I'm looking for reasons to fade him. He won't be popular, let me be clear, but I don't love this spot for him at all. Gary Bohannon from Baylor against Oklahoma State. I expect him to play this week. If he doesn't play, then this Baylor team is going to have a bad time, I think, against Oklahoma State's defense. And even if he does play, Bohannon, much like Chase Bryce, has really struggled against this opponent earlier in the year. Only threw for 173 yards, 0 touchdowns, even added a rushing score like Bryce, only 14 DraftKings points. I don't have a real path to see Bohannon, being someone you need to play this week. The last really interesting quarterback is actually Jordan Brookshire from Sdsu. This is an ugly play. Brookshire has not been good this year, but in 3 of his 5 games where he's seen significant playing time, he's top 20 DraftKings points, which at 5,900 is not terrible. I definitely see a path to him doing that again. He played, half the game or something against Boise. 11 of 15 for 192, 1 passing touchdown, 9 for 46 on the ground and the touchdown there. He has 5 rushing touchdowns in the 5 games he's seen action. Utah State's defense, not anything special. They tend to give up points. I think Sdsu probably scores around 27, 28 points in this game, and Brookshire has a pretty good chance to be involved in, I want to say, all of those. with his rushing touchdown ability and his mediocre passing, but he definitely has the chance. He probably accounts for 2 or 3 touchdowns, and if he accounts for 3 touchdowns, he will be a value play at 5,900. The issue is you're taking up a quarterback spot, and there are guys that can score 40 points on this slate, namely Dustin Crumb, Rocky Lombardi, Sam Hartman, Kenny Pickett. So the only real quarterback outside of that, those 2 big games is Jordan Brookshire that I'm looking at. It's just a price considered value for me. Can open up some things in your lineup if you are looking for value in other places. Hassan Haskins at running back leads the way at 8,700. He is priced way up in a very tough matchup, but so was, the case last week, and he absolutely smashed. But, that's a game where Michigan is really pushing because they know Ohio State has the offensive chops to make a comeback on them if they don't do that. Iowa does not have those offensive chops. And there's a chance that with Michigan in the playoff picture right now, Michigan might not push Haskins too hard if they're comfortably leading this game like 17-0 or something. Like, I don't see Iowa scoring really in this spot. Like, Michigan's defense has been really good lately, only giving up a max of 27 points to Ohio State. Sure, they lost to Michigan State, but Michigan State, that was a home game for them. I don't really love the price on Haskins here. Like, I just have a hard time getting to him when there are receivers that have big upside and quarterbacks that have big upside in easier matchups. Brian Robinson from Bama is questionable. Left last week's game against Auburn with a hamstring injury. It wouldn't have been, a minor thing in that game if they pull him out, because he's their lead back. They were trailing. Big game. They needed that one. So he's not going to leave the game unless it's serious, right? So he only saw 16 carries for 71 yards. He just hasn't been outstanding recently, and playing players against Georgia, again, not something we want to do. So I do not really have any interest in Robinson at this price. Jerome Ford for Cincy. Ford doesn't have the ton of volume that you want to see out of a running back at this price. No more than 20 carries in any game this year. No more than a single touchdown in the game since week 7 when he had 4 against UCF. But that kind of reminds me of the Michigan spot, right? Where Haskins is scoring a lot of touchdowns against these teams where, you want to keep putting up points because you're aware that their offense can make a comeback against you. Since he also in the playoff picture, they could theoretically try to run the score here because they want to solidify their place. They're currently 4th. If Bama beats Georgia, they probably fall out, and it's probably Bama, Georgia, Michigan, and maybe, if Oklahoma State beats Baylor, they might be in. So Cincy might be the odd man out, even if they're undefeated. It's a tough picture to paint there for Cincy. But Jerome Ford, good, but Houston's defense also very good against the run. So I don't love the spot for Ford. And in his last 2 games against bad defenses, when Cincy was putting up points well above their implied total here, 20 for around 80 yards and a touchdown. He has an upside for around 20-something DraftKings points, I think, in this particular spot. If you throw out Temple and Murray State matchups, which are garbage teams, Miami of Ohio even, he's very rarely topping 25 DraftKings points, which at this price just isn't enough on this slate. Abram Smith for Baylor, I'm going to pass there. Certainly capable of putting up a score that's solid, but I don't see him having the big upside in this game against an Oklahoma State defense that is very good. Jaylen Warren against Baylor. Warren's been kind of beat up recently. Against Oklahoma in a shootout game, he saw the major bulk of the carries. 17 carries, but only 56 yards and 1 touchdown. His last big outing was against TCU, and besides that, he's been kind of limited by either injury concerns or blowout run going to other players. So, if we look back to when Oklahoma State was playing closer games and Warren was not injured, it was, the Texas game, the Baylor game, the Kansas State game, putting up big scores and seeing big carry counts. So, and those were games that Oklahoma State controlled and they were semi-close, and they ran a lot of plays. Oklahoma State plays at a faster pace than you might expect, ranking 22nd in plays per game. Baylor, solid defense, but they're not really they're not elite. My issue here is that Warren, it's like his alpha running back role with like 30 carries has kind of gone on the wayside lately. I have a hard time trusting him to get back to that this week in a game that doesn't look particularly appealing with only a 46.5 total. So the guy I like most that we've talked about so far is Marquez Cooper from Kent State. He's been seeing 20 to 25 carries recently, has over 100 yards in 3 of his last 4 games, over 125 yards in 3 of his last 4 games. 1 to 2 touchdowns in all of those games. No real receiving role, but yeah, this is just a great spot for him. 23 for 173 and 2 last time in this matchup. He's only 6,500. Fire him up. Go with Marquez Cooper here at 6,500. Harrison Whaley from NIU is curious. He's been out since week 5 with an arm injury. I'm going to look real quick at NIU's depth chart, which I know they tend to release every week, which has provided us some insight into some injury news that we'll get to at receiver. Let me see what we got here. I should have pulled this up earlier. My bad. And as we look, the Western Kentucky Utah State game is going into a shootout. Yeah, I mean, apparently I saw that Tyrese Ritchie wasn't listed on their depth chart. I saw that in a blurb, so let me just see if I can find this real quick. This is killing me. Yeah, like RotoWire has it that he's not on the depth chart, but that's the only tweet I can see where it talks about a depth chart. So I don't know where they found this. I don't know, but I could try to look it up maybe later or something and tweet about it. But yeah, as we get back to the slate, Harrison Whaley, if he plays, he's definitely an option. Northern Illinois loves to just run their lead back like 25 plus times. So I like him a lot in a matchup with Kent State where, anyone on this offense can succeed. So I like him. McCaskill from Houston's a fade. Sanders from Bama's a fade. Goodson's a fade. Chris Smith is a fade in a major committee where he's very overpriced in my view. Zamir White, a fade in a committee. Abanikanda has the nut matchup, but is a fade in a committee. Like, I can't trust that guy to do anything. Jay Ducker from NIU would be the next guy up if Whaley is out. I'm basically throwing away the NIU game from WMU. Ducker, 54 yards on 21 carries, no touchdowns against Buffalo. Yikes. But he has a pretty good chance to top 20 fantasy points in the 20 to 25 range, I think, if they give him work against Kent State as they should. He probably doesn't have the most touchdown equity because of a guy named Clint Ratkovich from NIU that tends to just vulture touchdowns. He's like Jerome Bettis at the end of his career. Like, gets 4 to 10 carries, but somehow scored a touchdown, and he has 7 touchdowns in his last 5 games. That's insane. Ratkovich only 4,600, a guy that you could consider just for cheap touchdown equity. Like, no touches here, but yeah, they love this guy around the goal line, so that's an option. I don't think you play him and Ducker together. You probably don't want to do that. You're soaking up the touchdowns, but you're spending another roster spot to do it. You either kind of bank on Ducker getting like 4 touchdowns or Ratkovich getting like 3 or 4 touchdowns. I mean, Ducker got 2 touchdowns in the last game they played against Kent. There's the chance that like Ducker gets 0, Ratkovich gets even 4. Like, it sounds crazy, but crazy things happen in college football, especially in games that project to be complete shootouts like this one that ended 52 to 47 last time out. So that's kind of where I'm looking there. James Cook, not going to play this committee. Ebner, his price has gone through the roof. I can't play this guy in this matchup. Greg Bell from SDSU has a great matchup, but He just hasn't been the same guy recently, not getting alpha back carries. His major games came at the beginning of the year when he was getting bigger carry counts and being more efficient and scoring more touchdowns. I do not love this spot for him. He's low-key in a committee now, so I don't love it. Any of these Wake guys against Pitt, I'm not going to be playing. Calvin Tyler Jr. against Sdsu, I'm not playing either. Lafayette, Bailey in a committee, Hammond in a committee. If Hammond was if Abanikanda was out this week, I would love Rodney Hammond in this spot. I would love him. He's cheap. He saw 15 carries in the last 2 games with Abanikanda kind of on the mend. Scored a touchdown in each of those games. He would definitely be a guy I would look at in this matchup, but it's hard to trust any of these Pitt guys this week. Nate Noel sort of leads the App State committee, but I don't love this spot against Louisiana Lafayette. 17 carries for only 40 yards as the lead back last time. The only back with Cameron Peoples out. Normally these guys split the workload. With just Noel, he only had 17 carries. You would have expected more in that spot. He's gotten there when App State has put up like 45 points on offense, but I don't see that happening here this week against a solid Louisiana defense. Ratkovich is in play for me, like I said. Vincent Davis from Pitt has seen a price jump because of his production in the last 2 games without Abanikanda in the mix so much. Davis has been very efficient lately and definitely could get there in a matchup against Wake's awful run defense. So it's tough to trust him to get any real workload, though. Like 13 and 12 carries without Abanikanda, but he's he's gotten that in some other games that Pitt's really controlled, but in the sort of shootout games that Pitt plays, they tend to abandon the run. Like there were some drives last week against Virginia, not Syracuse, Virginia 2 weeks ago, where Pitt didn't even attempt to run. Like they just passed the entire drive. So that's the kind of offense we're dealing with here. Xavier Williams from Kent State, another very interesting option. He, in these shootout games, has seen 13 and 15 carries. He has some touchdown equity as evidenced in the Miami of Ohio game. He definitely can get there on this slate. Like he has major efficiency in this offense. He's like Marquez Cooper light. He is in play for me, but only like if you're MMEing, if you're in a large field tournament. Like Cooper's going to be really chalky. Williams presents good leverage off of him. I don't really have any interest in playing those 2 guys together. I just think if Williams is scoring touchdowns, that eats into Cooper's upside. And if Cooper is scoring a bunch of touchdowns, that eats into Williams' upside. So it would be one or the other for me. I like Cooper way more, but he's more expensive. Like I said, these Wake guys, these Louisiana guys, not in play for me either. Blake Quorum from Michigan is arguably the most underpriced player on the slate given his season-long production. But in games that have been close for Michigan, that he's been healthy against like better defenses. Ohio State game, disappointing. Could have had a touchdown, but seemed to still be injured. The Indiana game, he got hurt. Michigan State game, didn't do well, even though they put up like 30-something points. Nebraska game did pretty well, price considered, but, got a touchdown, 89 yards on the ground. Nebraska's defense isn't even actually that good. The Wisconsin game didn't really do well. Rutgers game didn't really do well. NIU, Washington, WMU, these are bad teams. So I am iffy on Quorum. I think he might be popular given the name value down here, and I think I might just take a stand and play guys from the higher upside Kent and NIU game over him. I don't like Antario Brown from NIU. He has been very touchdown dependent in the last 2 weeks, only seeing 5-3 carries. These guys are vulturing Duckers so hard. I don't love it for this. Brown, he's an option, I guess, but I don't love it. Cameron Peoples, like I said, is not someone I'm going to have interest in. He sticks out because of his fantasy points per game. But like I said, he's only really done well in these matchups where he's scoring multiple touchdowns. App State is putting up a ton of points, and all of his production came earlier in the year. So it looks like they've just given Nate Noel that lead role now. And then pretty much from there, I don't have any interest in any of these guys, if I'm being honest. Donovan Edwards, didn't really see any work last week with the return of Quorum. So yeah, I just don't really like any of these guys down here, if I'm being honest. At receiver, a lot of these guys normally correlate to the quarterbacks that I like. I like Addison more than I like Pickett, given the massive upside and just share of the offense that goes through Jordan Addison. So I like him, but man, is he expensive at 9,300. If you're playing guys from this Pitt Wake game, you're really telling the story that this game shoots out and the Kent State NIU game disappoints, because that game has a total of 1 point higher, but all the players are priced way lower. So it is hard to build around the Pitt Wake game, but if you do it right and the other game disappoints, that's sort of how you get a little leverage on the field there. Jameson Williams will be back after his targeting penalty last week against Georgia. He is just not an option for me. He probably sees like 10 to 12 targets again in this game, and they're high value targets as well, but it would take something spectacular for him to succeed and really break the slate in this spot. There are better options, and it's not like he's only succeeded this year. There have been games where he's failed, particularly earlier in the season. So I'm not all the way there on Williams at all this week. A.T. Perry is probably my favorite Wake receiver. He just sees a higher upside role than Jackery Roberson, who is the second option on this offense. Perry, more of like the touchdown and yardage guy, 13 touchdowns on the year, 1,100 yards, 53 catches. Roberson, more catches, less yards, less touchdowns. So you can play these guys together, but it's kind of hard. I lean Perry just because of where this Pitt defense has been giving up production. I've talked about it in my Substack, but guys like Rambo torched them, Sky Moore torched them, even Courtney Jackson from Syracuse last week, who's this guy, torched Pitt's defense. So I have a lot of interest in Perry. This might be a situation where you stack. I think my favorite way to stack this game is Hartman, Perry, Addison. Damn, that eats a lot of salary though. So you're probably paying down at running back then. And you're probably paying down you're paying down at like the rest of your receiver spots. You're not paying up for these Kent State NIU receivers that we can talk about later. Devin Tompkins against Sdsu can get there. But again, not a game environment I'm overly excited about. Tompkins has had his struggles recently as well. Really needs multiple touchdowns to really pay off at this price. I will be taking guys from other game environments. No interest in Bonner, like I said, but Tompkins is a one-off, is probably the way I would play it if you're going there. Tay Martin from Oklahoma State against Baylor. This is another guy where he's sort of the focal point of the passing game, but I don't see him breaking the slate here. I don't see him having multiple touchdown and like 150-yard upside, so it's really tough for me to get there at 7.3K. John Mechie had a huge game last week, but saw like 20-something targets with Williams out for most of the game. So Mechie, I kind of like more than Williams in that Bama might try to dink and dunk against Georgia and really play it safe, not try to attack overly aggressively against their defense. But Mechie's still a pretty thin play at this price. Dante Cephus from Kent State is the lead guy here. He's definitely in play at 7,100, but he's only had really 2 games that have broken the slate, and it's the Maryland game and the Buffalo game. Sure, he could get there again, but he hasn't really seen this kind of volume in most games. The game that he saw a lot of volume against Buffalo really came at the expense of Kashawn Abram, their second leading receiver, who had a big game against Miami of Ohio. But Abram, yeah, this guy hasn't really broken the slate either, and I don't know how much I get to Abram this week as someone else I like in this offense. So I like Cephus, but really, yeah, I'm sort of out on this Kent passing game the more I look at it. More on the Kent running game and Marquez Cooper, Dustin Crumb, Xavier Williams. Yeah, this NIU passing defense isn't great, but their rushing defense is even worse. So I think this lines up really well for Kent to run and NIU to try to play catch up. Dell against Cincy is a pass. Trayvon Rudolph is one of my favorite plays on the board. Tyrese Ritchie not on the depth chart for NIU again, so it seems unlikely he plays. Like I said, I don't know about Whaley yet, but I know Ritchie is not on the depth chart. Put up 66 fantasy points against this team last time out, 300 receiving yards. Yeah, this is the kind of play you're looking for. Like, this guy has major slate breaker potential. WMU game last time out, like I said, not something I'm going to be looking at. Against Ball State, they only put up 30 points. He had 20 DraftKings points. Yeah. With Ritchie being out, Rudolph has really taken over the alpha role in this offense, and I love him in this game. That is probably my smash play of the week. Brock Bowers from Georgia has upside, I guess, but he curiously has 10 touchdowns this season, all of which have come in multi-touchdown games. So he has 5 games of 2 touchdowns. So he has upside, but I don't really love his volume. Matchup with Bama, not great either. Alec Pierce from Cincy has been overpriced all year. He's very inconsistent. Roberson from Wake is in play. I don't know if I play both of these Wake receivers. It's kind of tough given the pricing. If you're playing Wake, you're probably telling the story that Addison also goes off. So it makes sense to play a 4-player block from this game, but it's, again, tough with the salaries. You're really digging deep in other spots if you do that. Hint, hint, you're probably playing Jordan Brookshire, which doesn't seem great. Not the worst. Jesse Matthews from Sdsu. Finally, Sdsu has a receiver worth talking about. He's basically been super boomer bust this year. He has 3 games of over 20 DraftKings points. Every other game, he's been under 9 DraftKings points. So the volatility is real here. He, of course, has had 2 of his best games in the last 2 weeks. Really seeing a lot of work against Boise and UNLV, being a big touchdown threat in that UNLV game. So, it's definitely an option. Nobody will play this guy, I don't think. But if you're playing Brookshire and you have the salary, it makes sense as a stacking option. I don't love it. Like I said, this is a very slow run first offense. So it's just something I'm looking at. It's hard not to look at those last 2 games and really be somewhat interested. It seems like the offense has catered more toward him recently. It's not like a one-off. It's kind of a trend now. 2 games of it happening. Derek Wright, Tyquan Thornton, Thomas Hennigan, Kashawn Abram I talked about, Brennan Presley, I don't really have any interest in. Cole Tucker has had big target volume with Tyrese Ritchie on the mend. Basically in the games that Ritchie has been injured/out, Tucker has seen big volume. Tucker is on the depth chart, so he was on the depth chart last week, didn't play. He's one of my favorite plays on the board at 5K if he gets the nod as a starter here. I like Rudolph, I like Tucker, and I like Lombardi if you're playing this game. I want to go down to Ritchie quick because Ritchie played in the Kent State game, but if you take him out, that filters even more work to Tucker. So I like that 3-man stack of Tucker, Rudolph, and Lombardi. If you're stacking up this game, that's the way I would stack up the sort of quarterback receiver situation on the NIU side. I don't really have too much interest in any of these other guys in this range. Taser Mack from Pitt, if he plays, is interesting. It's a really curious thing. Addison's volume has been huge lately, right? But that has all come in the absence of Taser Mack. So Addison wasn't exactly crushing at the beginning of the year. Why did this just do that? Okay, so yeah. Addison wasn't, just straight crushing the beginning of the year, right? Like, he had some good games against, their teams, but he was seeing like 6 catches as a peak. Sure, he could go for 3 touchdowns like he did against Western Michigan and New Hampshire. That's in the range of outcomes, but he hasn't been absolutely smashing. That Virginia game still lingers in a lot of people's minds. 9,300 is a big price tag. I think there's a case to be made for playing Mack as a little bit of leverage off of Addison. If you're stacking this game up, you could avoid Addison, play Mack. Addison's targets really spiked when Mack went out. Mack had, 15 to 25 point potential when he was active. So I definitely look at Mac as a guy that could present some leverage on this slate. Same goes for Jared Wayne, who has seen his role sort of decrease in the last 2 weeks with Addison just being a target monster. But Wayne has also had some pretty solid games in Mac's absence, going over 15 to like 20 DraftKings points in that range. So I like Wayne here if Mac is out. I like Addison as well if Mac is out. I like Wayne as a cheap stacking option in this game. If you think Wayne maybe scores 1 touchdown, takes away from that like 3 or 4 touchdown upside that Addison has. And yeah, I mean, if Wayne's doing well, Addison is probably still doing well, but might not be absolutely smashing. Like Wayne was valuable in the UNC Duke Miami games, right? So we look at those for Addison. UNC Duke Miami. Yeah, he had 1 game there that will be a slate breaker against Duke, but Duke is really terrible. I mean, Wake's defense isn't great either, but that's sort of how I'm breaking down that spot. Probably only playing one of these guys, and probably not playing Pickett either, just because of Hartman's upside on the ground. The next guy I would get to on the list is Nikim Johnson from Kent State. He has had some on and off games recently. Didn't really do anything against Akron or Miami of Ohio. But the CMU NIU games, the Ohio game, he was involved. He had a rushing touchdown in the NIU game, but didn't really see a big receiving role. But this isn't a high volume passing offense. So yeah, I like Johnson a little bit more than Kashan Abram just because of the role he has. He's none of these guys are super interesting to me, but Johnson has more appeal to me than Abram does. Travis Morin from Wake is an option if you're stacking up the Pitt-Wake game, but I don't really think he has a ton of upside. He could get there, but seems like just the alphas tend to do well against Wake or against Pitt. None of these other guys particularly interest me going down the list. Lucas Krull from Pitt, another option. If he scores a touchdown, he's probably valuable. Been seeing pretty good volume lately with 3 of his last 4 games going over 4 catches and 40 yards, which at 3,900, puts him around like 10 DraftKings points. If he scores a touchdown, he's around 15. He's scored a bunch of touchdowns this year, 6 on the year. So definitely another option from this Pitt attack that makes sense and is a good value play. Jashon Poke, not Kashan Abram, Jashon Poke is another option from the Kent State passing attack, which is pretty spread out. And yeah, if he goes for around 4 to 5 catches, 30 to 80 yards, he can also be valuable down here at this range. If he scores a touchdown, that is bonus points, baby. So for me, it's like Poke is an option down here. Krull is an option. Gavin Bartholomew from Pitt. Nobody's going to play this guy, but he's been a big focus of Narduzzi in press conferences lately. They've been praising him a lot, stepping up. He has been rewarded with 3 touchdowns in their last 4 games. Less volume than Lucas Krull, but the touchdown equity has been Bartholomew lately. So I like Bartholomew in this game as well. 3,700, very appealing price. He scored, he basically has a floor of like 5 DraftKings points at this point in time. 3,700 on a slate with so many guys we want to pay up for. Pretty appealing. Nothing else on the slate to really talk about for me. Like Pitt receivers, Shockey Jock Lewis, an option, a warm body on an offense that is projected to score a lot of points. Trey Tipton from Pitt gets like 1 catch a game lately, but no upside there. So that's pretty much all I'm looking at this week, guys. Best of luck to you. Hit me up on Twitter if you have any questions, at Amandridge93DFS. You can find my Substack in the channel description, the channel bio, whatever you want to call it. Please subscribe, like, comment, give me some engagement. I really appreciate that. And always feel free to contact me on Twitter. We can talk the games. You can tell me I'm wrong. You can tell me you agree with me. I don't care. Just talk about it with me, Be there for me. So without further ado, I'm going to sign off here. Get ready for... I might turn on this WKU Utah or UTSA game. Apparently it's shooting out. So, who saw that coming, right? Everyone. But anyway... best of luck to you this weekend. Have a fun Saturday. Get ready for a chalk-filled NFL slate on Sunday where all the chalk fails as usual. So best of luck to you this weekend. Enjoy.